My name is Chris Kroll, and a couple months ago I started this group, and I see a lot of familiar faces, so thank you all for coming back. The mission of our organization is, our group is for families with advanced learner or gifted children who live in or attend school in Loudoun County. And we support the next generation of innovators and problem solvers by educating parents on how best to address the special needs of their children. So this is what we do. Our next speaker is Dr. Randy Hollister, headmaster of Loudoun Country Day School. And Randy's going to talk to us about developing critical thinking skills in gifted children. Randy?
Thanks. Well, this has been a real energy rush right down to the person preceding me, and that was fantastic. I feel like changing my entire talk now. But a couple of items of joy. First, to our host, Ken, thank you so much for this evening. Thank you very much. Thank you. We really appreciate it. It's great to be here. And also one other thank you to our fearless leader, Chris Kroll.
Yeah. Thank you.
I also wanted to just mention quickly, and I don't know if this will be counted against my 10 minutes, but if it is, that's okay. In mentioning Chris and her leadership, she is such an inspiration to me and to our community. I'm sure many of you know what we have been going through as a community, and especially the Miller family and Gabriella. And what Chris has done, I mean, my topic is developing critical thinking, and there's a lot to that, obviously, as you all know. But what Chris has done in this campaign is such an example of the mind, the heart, the spirit, critical thinking, turbocharged in creating a campaign, an approach that can support this wonderful girl and her family. And it is so moving to see the results of what Chris has done, because it's all about love for this family. So we're just indebted to you for doing that, and our prayers go out to the family. Okay, on a lighter note, I'm a former English teacher, and so let's start with a joke. Think grammatically now. What do you call Santa's elves? Yes, subordinate clauses. All right. Well, maybe I should have everybody stand up, and we're going to work through the toes and the balls of your feet. I don't know about yours, but mine are really warm right now. Okay. Before commenting on critical thinking, and I'm going to take a different approach. You've heard a lot of really interesting, nitty-gritty details and great examples and some good kinesthetic experiences and so on. My comments are going to be a little bit more general, and so I'm not going to change my remarks, but I hope there will be something of benefit in them. I do want to mention that I was not able to attend the November meeting, and that was because I was visiting a premier school in the nation for gifted students in Indiana. The school is the Sycamore School for the Gifted, and it's in Indianapolis. And I've known about the school a number of years and really wanted to visit it for two reasons. One is really just my own ongoing professional development, and to especially observe their approach to differentiated instruction taking place within the context of an incredibly well-rounded program and a very nurturing place for gifted students. The second reason I wanted to visit this school is because, you know, Loudoun Country Day School's explicit mission does not include gifted students. It's not in our statement, but of course we have a great many gifted students in our program. And in recent years, we have seen a dramatic increase in the number of families and specifically students who are gifted coming to our program looking for a program that will challenge them, but within the spirit and context of a very well-rounded approach and total experience, including athletics and the arts. And so, as a result of these experiences and in the work we've done in recent years, we have continued to add considerable resources to our enrichment programs. We're continuing to expand the use of technology and continuing to expand our knowledge of differentiated instruction so that we can meet the needs of all of these students. Now about critical thinking and gifted students. This topic, critical thinking, was part of my doctoral study, so it is a subject that I do care a great deal about and have read a little bit about this. And a general point for me on this topic is that I do not see this as something at all that is only for any particular kind of student, gifted or not gifted, but for all students. And I really believe that a mindset about critical thinking really ought to understand and appreciate that. But what is critical thinking, particularly in the context of education? Well, first of all, everybody in the room knows it's really not a new concept at all. Whether it was called that hundreds of years ago or not, I think we can all recognize that probably the best early embodiment of critical thinking as we know it as a method of instruction and a goal for students was found in Socrates. And indeed, even today, educators will certainly refer to the Socratic method of instruction as a way of engaging students and challenging them to employ facts and evidence and logical reasoning to support their conclusions and solutions. A little bit more on the history. In the 1930s, you know, the era of John Dewey and James Kilpatrick and Robert Maynard Hutchins and the other leading educators of the time, the educational journal Social Frontier published many articles that used the term critical thinking. So it's really a very much talked about, researched, debated topic. And for the most part, if you go back and look at those articles published at that time, they're pretty tame. It's not the most scintillating reading always. Pretty straightforward presentations. Although I would call your attention to some of the later debates between Dewey and Robert Maynard Hutchins that became rather rebarbative and you know, a little bit emotional perhaps. Then we move into fast forward to the post-Sputnik years of the 60s when producing better thinkers and better problem solvers became a matter of national concern, resulting in significant changes in curriculum design and textbook publishing. One specific of many results was the so-called process-oriented curriculum that placed a greater emphasis on open-ended questions, reasoning, and critical thinking. The year 1983, you all remember, was profound for education with the publication of Nation at Risk, perhaps the most dramatic call to action for educational change that our country has seen. And anyone who has ever read the report will recall from memory the claim outset at the beginning that if another country imposed on us our own educational system, we would consider it an act of war. Throughout much of the rest of that decade, critical thinking became a great topic of writing and discussion, entire conferences devoted to it, sometimes provoking heated debates among the educators, especially the philosophers of education. And much of the debate involved the definition of critical thinking. What, in fact, is it? Robert Ennis called it the assessment of statements. Harvey Siegel focused on reasoning, and John McPeck viewed critical thinking as reflective skepticism. Although I found the body of work interesting, I had the opportunity to witness one of those heated debates at the 1985 conference in New Orleans. But I did not always find it satisfying, all that literature, in terms of practical solutions for teachers. So 30 years later, what are my thoughts about critical thinking in education? Well, for whatever it is called, critical thinking to me is about a process that engages the students and welcomes, inspires, and requires them to think deeply, to question, to imagine, to explore alternative points of view and paths to solving problems. Helping each student to become an effective critical thinker requires that we understand as much as possible about his or her readiness to learn. Thus, the importance of being able to provide different levels and styles of instruction as much as possible. But helping to develop critical thinkers involves so much more than cognitive considerations. And you've heard this theme already tonight. We must know our students as persons first, what their learning styles are, what their personal interests are, what motivates them, what their personalities are like, what makes them comfortable, what obstacles might inhibit their ability to think critically, what are their fears. An anxious or unmotivated child is not an effective learner, period, let alone a critical thinker. Teaching is rarely a linear process, and the development of critical thinking in our students often requires much more than purely challenging intellectual activity. Quite often, the most important ingredient in promoting critical thinking in our students involves making that personal connection with our students, showing absolute respect and love for them, being willing to explain why they should even bother to explore a subject in depth or think critically about it at all in the first place. The personal and sometimes even emotional dimensions of critical thinking receive little attention. Daniel Goleman's study on emotional intelligence is refreshing because it provides important insight, not only about emotional IQ, but creates a platform for considering the role of emotional intelligence in a more traditional cognitive view of critical thinking. Acknowledging the emotional component of developing critical thinking in all students is vital. The crucial role that emotions such as delight, joy, humor, enthusiasm, expectation, anticipation, determination, and surprise, to mention but a few, what those play in supporting critical thinking is exactly what well-rounded, nurturing, and challenging academic programs do. One of the best ways to promote critical thinking among students is to make sure that they have robust educational experiences and opportunities, not only in highly intellectual disciplines, but also in all of their educational experiences, including the arts and athletics. And that's what I wanted to share with you tonight. And I thank you for the opportunity to be here.